This podcast is brought to you by Dragon Shield. Use code PLAYTOWIN5 at the affiliate link down below for 5% off to help support the show.
Welcome to the Play to Win podcast. I'm starting this over. That was horrible.
Loud.
That was
a little
loud,
yeah.
and that was I hated the timbre of my voice.
Little high pitch.
Little high,
Let's
yeah.
go lower. How low can you do it?
Welcome to the Play to Win podcast,
It was good.
where we talk about winning in cEDH. I'm Cam.
I'm Dylan.
And this week, we are going to be talking about the best stacks pieces and the best stacks effects that most impact a cEDH game when they hit the field.
Right, yeah. We're not talking about Stacks Commanders. We did an episode about that. We have already done there. We've been that. We are now specifically talking about Stacks effects. We should define Stacks effects because I think a Stacks piece probably is a little bit different to different people, and I think that definition is a little loose. So should we talk about what our definition of a stacks piece is?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So when I think of a stacks piece, I think of an effect on either on a permanent, and I think of an effect on a permanent.
That's the first checkable box is a permanent.
Yeah, it's a permanent because the spell is going to go away, and that's
Not
only
stacks.
going to be something that's temporary.
Okay, we got a permanent. What does a permanent do?
A permanent that has a static ability that either taxes, meaning that it makes an ability more expensive, or it refuses someone from doing a certain action.
Okay, refuses an action, or yeah, I think that's a good way to say. I was going to say or a resource. Refuses like it denies a resource in some way.
That's great. Yeah, it's more than an action; it's a resource. Yeah.
I think that's great. So I think something like Thalia. That will be a stacks piece. Everything costs one more. Non-creatures cost one more.
Correct. It's a static ability on a permanent that is affecting the way that the game is played moving forward.
Right. Collect Droof has a static ability. Artifacts can't be activated. That will be another example of a stacks piece. If you're listening to our podcast, if you know who you are, you probably know what a stacks piece is, but this is just our definition. Something like a Ristic Study, I don't count that as a stacks piece.
I'm also not counting that as a stacks piece.
Because
if you want to hear us talk about Ristic Study, go listen to our best card advantage or card engines. Well, that's what it was, our advantage engines podcast.
I think the stacks piece is important that it has to actually stop your opponents or all players from doing something. You can't give them the option. Ristic Study doesn't stop them from doing anything. It can draw you a billion cards, but they can just not pay the one ever. So it's not a stacks piece.
Exactly, yeah. There's a prevention on here. So we're also not going to see Orcish Bowmaster on this list either, because that is something that we're considering a value card because it gains you advantage over the course of a long period of time, whereas stacks pieces, we'll notice most of them won't continue to trigger throughout the game. Like, it's a static ability that is just there and happening.
The Bowmaster doesn't stop anyone from drawing cards. It's kind of the same like with Ristic Study, where like you're still allowed to draw all the cards you want. There's just going to be a damage pointed somewhere each time you do. So to me, that's not a stacks piece because a stacks piece stops something.
It stops it. Yeah, exactly.
Technically, I think in my mind, I think of things like Thalia as taxing effects, which are different from stacks pieces.
It's a subcategory of stacks.
They're all in the same. I agree. They're all in the same thing. Like tax pieces are just a little subcategory off of a regular stacks piece, maybe. But
well, let's talk about a bunch of them now. They'll be our first ones. I actually call them Thalias because Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, was one of the it came out in like one of the first sets that I was playing Magic in, and
which is funny because Thalia is also something else on a stick, right? It's Thorn of Amethyst, or
that's what it is. Thorn of Amethyst on a stick. Sphere of Resistance is the other one, but that taxes all spells as opposed to just non-creatures.
So Thorn of Amethyst. Oh, it's hard to say. Thorn of Amethyst, I think, is the first version, or at least before Thalia. I don't know if it's the first version of this
Thalia
effect.
came out way later.
And it was way more popular.
But exactly. Like, it made the Death and Taxes decks in Vintage and Legacy actually super playable because your whole deck wasn't taxed.
For me, this is a tax effect. Anything that makes something cost one more, tax effect.
Agreed. So this is something that drastically affects the way that cEDH games are played the second that one of these three spells hit. If you're playing a creature-based deck and you have access to Thorn of Amethyst or Thalia, though, that's really where these abilities shine, because what we'll notice is that the higher ranked stacks pieces that we'll see are cards that allow you to break parity and really only affect your opponents as opposed to affecting yourself.
Yeah, which is the definition basically of breaking parity, is when you can use a piece that's designed to affect all players, but you don't care about it. So something like Thalia, when you get a handful of creatures, you don't care because it's not, you're breaking parity on it.
Exactly, yeah. So Sphere of Resistance, if you're playing the creature-heavy decks, is kind of like well, I guess I'm going to see a lot of ad nauseums in this specific meta, so I want to make sure I have, like, the most amount of this effect as I possibly can. But most of the other decks, I don't know, I tend to prefer Thorn of Amethyst and Thalia.
Also, Trinisphere is like one of these taxing effects. I don't know if we're talking about the whole group right now or an individual card, but...
Well, I have all three of them lumped together because they all basically tax at the same amount.
Okay, so Trinisphere is different.
Because
Okay.
I put Thalias as the category.
Interesting.
But Trinisphere is the next category that we're going to talk about too then.
I put Trinisphere in the same category as these. It's just like a different type of one. If they're casting a 4-mana spell, it doesn't cost extra. If they're casting a 2-mana spell, it does cost 1 extra. Sometimes it can be way more than that. If they're trying to cast Mana Crypts or something, this can make that like impossible.
So the reason why I separated this out from the Thalias is because I think this is like slightly more impactful. It is a little bit more mana than the Thalias, but it prevents significantly more from happening than the Thalias do, even though it is a little bit more difficult outside of Urza to break parity on this.
So here's my thing. I agree, but I would still rate Thalia higher than Trinisphere just because Thalia is a first striking attacking creature.
Yeah, good point.
So I think that makes it different from the other two Thalia effects because they can't attack. And in most STAX decks, it being a creature is relevant. In Winota, it's relevant. In Tymna, it's very relevant. So that kind of makes Thalia, I think, a better card than Trinisphere.
Okay, I like that. So now we're at an interesting point where do we separate out the other Thalias and say, where do we have Sphere of Resistance versus Thorn of Amethyst versus Trinisphere then?
Yeah, because I think Sphere of Amethyst and Sphere of... No, Sphere...
Whoa!
Too many fucking cards. Sphere of Resistance and Thorn of Amethyst, I rate them a little bit lower.
Yeah,
sometimes in the right meta, they can be backbreaking to have extra of that effect. But for me, I'm going to Thalia kind of like way before I'm going to these cards most of the time.
What I like about Sphere and Thorn is that it gives you the effect in non-white decks. So like Magda's a big fan of both of these cards.
Sometimes being an artifact is very relevant.
Yeah.
Like in Magda, sometimes being a creature is very relevant. You play more artifact decks, I play more creature decks. It's hard to rate these things against each other. That's just, from my experience, Thalia is better.
Overall, I would say Trinisphere is more impactful than Sphere of Resistance and Thorn of Amethyst. If we're going based off cards that are better, I might fight you on Thalia versus Trinisphere, but I'll put Thalia above Trinisphere for now because I think that there's a lot of good reasons that you have that will sway me to the side.
We always talk about STAX pieces, STAX decks in particular needing to have ways to end the game quicker, and having an extra attacking creature, I think, is just like the little push over Trinisphere that makes it just that much better.
I knew you were going to say that. That's why I left that at the top.
I do want to say one negative about these type of effects is that they affect all of your opponents, which is, like we said, a good thing, but also can be a bad thing. If your opponent has interaction and didn't know the Thalia was coming and now can't stop player C from going off because your Trinisphere is shutting them down, that can be a little bit of a feels bad to know that the other player would have been able to stop another player's win, but you didn't allow that.
Especially if like you have a Thalia and then someone else goes for like this creature-based combo that also didn't care, because that comes up a lot now too.
Right, yeah. So you got to be very particular. Pay attention to the board state. Pay attention to the clues that your opponents are giving. Pay attention to the commanders to know when's the appropriate time to cast these cards. I've been shaving them a little bit in lists recently, but the effect is still very powerful, especially early on, especially turn 1. Trinisphere can be kind of backbreaking.
Yeah, and now all these effects are very powerful and backbreaking, like you said, but I think right now in the meta, there are going to be a couple of other cards that we will see are going to be a little bit more impactful now.
Let's go to them.
Let's keep going. Let's talk about some Graveyard Hate.
Graveyard Hate. I love it.
I love Graveyard Hate. Dauthi Voidwalker and Rest in Peace are the two main Graveyard Hate cards that we're going to talk about here.
Dauthi Voidwalker up here. Rest in Peace.
Like
for
way
me,
down.
Way
like
down here,
I have it like lower than all of the other cards we talked about is where I have it.
The effect is very strong. I cannot deny that. Exiling a graveyard right now and then going forward for only 2 mana, that is a great effect. I will not deny it. But for me, I need my STAX pieces to also help push me a little bit. There's just so many good ones right now. Dauthi being able to steal me an ad nauseum, steal me something else that's good for my opponents, even just get me a fucking land if I need it. The fact that it can help me also win the game. If you watched our most recent gameplay, I had an opportunity to counterspell a Thassa's Oracle, so that would go under Dauthi. I had also several other options to use Dauthi in very cool, fun ways, like casting Endurance, and I didn't do any of that. But that is not a good reason to say Dauthi is not good, because Dauthi is very fucking good, whereas Rest in Peace just doesn't do enough for me.
That card's a card you can't really break parity on, whereas like Dauthi Voidwalker only exiling your opponent's graveyards, like
So
that's
helpful.
It's so helpful, and when you get to blow it, then it's perfect.
I recently put Blood Pod back together, and I was using the database list because I felt like I needed to just reset my list. It had Rest in Peace in there. That was one of the first cards that I cut. Like I said before, as powerful as it is, it being another thing that shuts off my birthing pod, that I don't have a great way to get rid of it when I need to get rid of it. Like, at least with some of the creatures, you can like do things to sacrifice them, throw them into front of combat or whatever. The enchantment, that Rest in Peace, is fucking staying until someone gets rid of it. And if someone's getting rid of it, it's probably because they're winning the game. So I cut that card right away.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. Rest in Peace is not impactful enough. Like, that's it. That's just it. It's just not impactful enough. Well, Dorothy Voidwalker, much better. We have that at the very top of our list so far.
For me right now, Dorothy is the number one card out of all the ones we've talked about, and Rest in Peace is somewhere along with Sphere of Resistance, probably. Maybe below Sphere of Resistance.
I have it below the other spheres. The decks that want the spheres want them a lot more than the decks that want Rest in Peace.
Yeah, it's hard to break parity off this, so it's hard to gain advantage.
What about Chalice of the Void?
Oof.
Is this a consideration for the top 10?
I don't know. I like Chalice of the Void in combination with other things. If you can get a Chalice of the Void and a Sanctum Prelate out and maybe a clone on your Sanctum Prelate out, then we're really talking about something really great.
Hell
if you
yeah.
can lock a couple things out. I have found the Chalice of the Void thing, it's just the meta is too wide open. It's hard to name the right thing. You can name the 1-drop and they're going to cast the Tainted Pact. You name the 2-drop and they're going to have the Swords to Plowshare and vice versa. It's hard to see when it's good and when it's not good because it doesn't do anything until it doesn't do anything. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't do anything until it's not relevant anymore.
You only see it be good when people forget about it, and then like their spell gets countered. But
which is great in tournaments, but a lot of times I'm not getting people on that. You know what I mean? Although I really fucking want to because that's what the card does.
It's also a lot different than a lot of the other stacks pieces that make you name a number or something like that, because you have to spend mana into it depending on what you want to name too. So like there's also a lot of other timing considerations you have to put into this too.
There's a lot of Ancient Tomb, Soul Ring, Mana Crypt type effects that give you that burst of 2 mana to have this come out easy on 1 mana, which is great. The fact that you can get it out early is also super relevant. If you'll notice, a lot of these stacks pieces we'll talk about today are like 2 mana and up. So having a 1 or 0 mana stacks piece, if you can combine this with a Deafening Silence on turn 1, whoo, you got that game. But if you're drawing it on turn 5, this card might be a stinker.
I think I kind of like a lot of these other pieces that we've talked about more that are going to do a little bit more to affect the board and how the game is being played, as opposed to like maybe also like hurting me quite a bit too.
With that being said, though, I think it's definitely worse than Dothi, worse than Thalia, but I think it's close to Trinisphere, maybe just under Trinisphere.
I would have actually put this underneath Trinisphere, Sphere of Resistance, and Thorn of Amethyst.
That's tough. That's close. I think I go to Chalice before I go to Sphere, but I totally understand why you would put it lower.
Yeah, I think that the spheres are a little bit more impactful than the Chalice. Is just my opinion.
For me, the ability to double spell on an early turn, getting this like on 0 or something, that ceiling is so high, and as a stack, I need to impact the board as quickly as possible. So that's why I rate it higher.
I guess that's true. I guess I underestimate how not only easy it is to get out on turn 1 to have it named 1, but also probably how little of your deck outside of like Mana Dorks or something like that is actually affected by a Chalice on 1 too.
Yeah, like if you can get the Soul Ring into it, which is where you want to be to get it on turn 1, you don't really care if it's on 1 anymore because you have your mana, which is what a lot of your 1-drops are at that point. And if you can get it out on 0 on like an early, like if you're going on turn 1 or something, like if you're on the play, it can be very helpful to shut out Mox Diamonds and Moxes and Mana Crypts and stuff like that. It buys you time. Yeah,
I guess that's true. Do you think it wins you more games than Trinisphere wins you?
Trinisphere loses me more games than Chalice loses me. I don't know about the other way, but Trinisphere definitely loses me more games.
All right, I think you sold me on this. I'll put Chalice of the Void underneath Thalia and put it above all of the other spheres.
I think it's above even Trinisphere.
Yeah, by the way, do we have Thorn of Amethyst or Sphere of Resistance as better?
Thorn's better.
That's kind of what I think
more
too.
Abusable, more easily abusable.
I think it's easier to abuse, but I also think that there are certain decks that want Sphere more than Thorn. Depending on the type of deck that you're playing.
I think those decks are worse.
Pick a number 1 through 7.
6.
We're going to talk about Artifact Tappers next.
Artifact Tappers.
There's actually a decent amount of things that tap artifacts or make artifacts enter the battlefield tapped.
Oh, I understand.
That's what I mean. I don't mean things that like say tap target artifact. I mean like they will.
I'm like, is that good? I don't know.
No, there's a decent amount of things that will say all artifacts come into play tapped, which is really good at shutting off mana.
Blind obedience type effects is what you're saying.
Blind obedience,
this is one of them.
Manglehorn. Okay. I'm also prematurely throwing Dauntless Dismantler.
Ooh, sure.
If you're watching this way in the future, maybe we'll laugh at where we're gonna put this. But
yeah, I haven't played a single game with Dauntless, whatever.
Neither have I. But we're gonna do a speculative fun pick.
Out of the three that you just said, I like Manglehorn the best, I think.
Obviously, because it enters the battlefield and destroys an artifact as well. And none of these just do that for free on their body.
Yeah, exactly. I like that a lot, especially because it doesn't actually shut off the artifacts. If you are the STAX deck, you have to play the tempo game. You have to time your shit out. So you know that you got to get your birthing pod out early, but you can still use your birthing pod. Whereas a Collector Roof completely shuts your own thing down. So the buying actually just enough turns, just enough time with this Manglehorn, I think is really actually underrated. It's really good.
The best part about Manglehorn actually is that it says artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. Yeah, it's extra good when like you're also trying to win through dockside extortionist loops and like you can just laugh at your opponents.
That's right.
You can't do that.
That's so fucking good. Yeah, Manglehorn is great.
Manglehorn is great. I think it's better than Thalia, and I'm gonna put it at the number 2 slot, right underneath Dauthi Voidwalker.
That sounds perfect.
Out of Dauntless Dismantler or Blind Obedience, speculatively,
it's got to be the Dauntless whatever. What's it called?
Dauntless Dismantler.
The Dauntless Dismantler. I haven't played any games with it yet, but I have to assume it's better than Blind Obedience. The Extort is a real thing. I won't deny that. But the fact that this can destroy stuff, that's extra card advantage in my mind.
But Blind Obedience does also include creatures, though, too. So, like, it does have this extra little...
Yeah, it's true. How relevant is that, though? The creatures entering tapped, most of them are summoning sick anyway.
Unless you're playing against Slicer, I'm usually not too worried about that.
It's like good so that they can't put up blockers. I get that, but what we're really after for this effect is the artifacts coming in tapped. I think, right?
Most definitely. Especially because a lot of these decks also get more leverage out of the creature with the ability as opposed to having this effect on an enchantment unless you're Sithis.
Sure, yeah, okay. I rate this one pretty high, but I can't put it above Trinisphere yet just because I haven't seen it yet, although I do think it probably will end up being stronger, and we'll look back on this and laugh.
I'll probably want this more than Thorn of Amethyst, so right now I'll put it in between Trinisphere and Thorn, but I agree. I think we'll end up having this definitely higher than Trinisphere, probably higher than Chalice of the Void, and arguably on par with Thalia, Guardian of Thraben.
Yeah, like I don't know if you would ever do this, but like you could even like Savine's Reclamation this because you have to sack it to do that artifact ability.
Dude. What the fuck are we doing?
Like that.
What the fuck are we doing? I'm gonna do a hot take. This is going under Manglehorn.
Okay.
Hot take. Yeah, better than Thalia. It blocks Thalia.
So 1/4. Like that ass is huge.
That's massive.
Blocking the Gila, blocking Timna. That's actually super relevant.
Yeah. That puts in a lot of work.
All right, we'll keep it high.
Putting that at number 3 right now.
Okay.
Blind Obedience, we know, is not going to be that high, though. I think this is going to be probably a little bit more closer to Trinisphere, Thorn of Amethyst.
I would say, Thorn of Amethyst. I end up cutting Blind Obedience a lot. As much as I like the card, I don't find like it does enough in cEDH.
Yeah, I'm going to actually put it underneath all the spheres and just above Rest in Peace, because I think I'm a little bit more up on Blind Obedience right now, but that was probably up until I saw that they were printing Dauntless Dismantler, and now I'm just like,
seems like we got a better version.
All in on that instead.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting that when something, I don't want to say strictly better, but when a better version of something comes out, it makes the initial version kind of like way worse than it ever was for some, like it knocks it down.
It's exciting because now we have something else that we can do that's even better. All of our decks got more powerful. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So that's going to lead us right into our Null Rod effects.
Okay.
These are the effects that completely shut off the activated abilities of artifacts.
What are the cards on this list?
So we have Null Rod, Collector Oof, and Stony Silence. Those are the 3.
Stony Silence really doesn't see a lot of play, does it?
It really doesn't. I don't know why, but this one's going to end up, like, that one's going to end up a lot lower than the other 2 for some reason. Yeah.
Collector Oof, interestingly enough, for me is like a number 1. I truly think this is like, I have won so many games, STAX games, off the back of Collector Oof, just shutting down 2 decks and cutting in half the 3rd deck, and you just get to do whatever you want because everyone was kind of invested in their Mana Crypts and their Chromoxes and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And the deck decks that do play Collector Oof are also like super aware of their Collector Oof too, so they're much more in on Carpet of Flowers and Mana Dorks and mana from literally any other source besides artifacts, and it is just such a nail in the coffin for so many decks. Thrasios Brews decks that are trying to win through Dockside Extortionist loops.
Yeah, the fact that it shuts off win conditions and just like game progression is really powerful. Some effects, like the Stifle effects on creatures, the Hushwing Gryph effects, they only stop the win condition most of the time, which is why they're not so good, because they don't do anything to the actual like advancements of your opponent's game plans. Whereas Collector Oof says your Mana Crypt doesn't do anything, so you can't get your turn Heuristic Study out, and also your Dockside Extortionist win condition later, that also doesn't do anything. And the fact that Collector Oof is 2 mana, so you can cast it on turn 1 or 2 pretty easily. I wouldn't say 1 on easily, but you can cast it early very easily, and you can also use green tutors to find it kind of whenever you want. There's so many just Finale of Devastation type effects that you can easily get enough mana to find the Collector Oof. I find myself tutoring for this card a lot. I rate it very highly.
Yeah, I think STAX decks do want to tutor for this very highly because this is one of the most universally punishing effects in cEDH. There is just so much reliance on artifacts. It shuts off Lion's Eye Diamonds from happening as well too. So that's another win con that we didn't talk about. Stocks are very high on this type of effect. This is going to make me also want to put Null Rod up pretty high too, just because again this effect is just so punishing.
Yes, I will say the only reason why I put Oof a little bit higher, same as the creature yada yada, but specifically Collector Oof is a green creature that is like very easily tutorable in the green creature decks. Null Rod in the blue artifact decks is also very tutorable, but I just feel like there are more green creature tutors to the battlefield that make the possibility of Oof getting into play much more often. Now, Null Rod being colorless to cast is also very helpful.
It's very
and relevant.
nice, yeah.
But I think Oof being a green creature, it really makes the effect so much more powerful than if it were on a white enchantment, Stony Silence, which sees basically no play because it doesn't advance you in any way.
Also tougher to interact on the stack with for that reason.
Yes.
Like Collector Oof as a creature, there's just a
Creatures
lot.
are uncounterable,
It's
basically.
95% of the time.
We have Force of Will, Mana Drain, maybe Delay. Like, their creatures are, for the most part, uncounterable.
Yeah, so this is definitely going to resolve significantly more than a Null Rod would.
Pact of Negation. There's a couple, but there's not a ton of Mind Break Trap. There's a few ways to stop creatures in the stack, but not a lot.
That's true. Also, the mono blue decks that do want to tutor for Null Rod are really weak to Null Rod.
They're using the artifacts. They're an artifact deck.
There's a reason why you're playing Transmute Artifact if that's the case. So I think Null Rod is going to go where? Where do we have Null Rod? Probably
lower than Trinisphere, but
lower
around
than
there.
Trinisphere. So that's lower than the tappers then, right? The artifact enter the battlefield tappers and stuff.
Oh, are those higher than Trinisphere?
Those are like way higher than Trinisphere.
Yeah.
They're
It's
above
worse than
Chalice of the
Manglehorn.
Void, and they're above Thalia
What's our list
too.
right now? Can you give it to me?
So our top we have Collector Oof.
Yep.
Then we have Dauthi Voidwalker.
Agree.
Then Manglehorn and Dauntless Dismantler after that. Followed by Thalia. Then Chalice of the Void, and then Trinisphere.
Better than Thalia?
I think it's better than Thalia. So that means that it's worse than Dauntless Dismantler.
Worse than Dauntless Dismantler?
And if you want to know why, you can go back and listen to some of the other cards that combo a little bit better. And Null Rod's just kind of like a thing.
It doesn't advance you. We're going to always come back to that. The stacks pieces nowadays are so fucking good. They progress you to find a win also. And if your stacks piece is not doing that, it's going to be worse.
Yeah,
Worse.
white is definitely the best color for stacks, and green is definitely like right there as one of the either second or third best stacks colors right now.
Honestly, black has only a few, just 2, but they are some of the strongest ones we got.
Some of the best
We've talked
fucking
about
things
Dauthi.
you can do.
We're going to talk
Yeah.
about the other one too, but
That's true. And then Stony Silence then. Speaking of
Shitter.
white being the best.
Right in the shitter.
Somehow this is a shitter. Why is this a shitter?
it's hard to tutor, and it doesn't progress you in any way. That's the
Neither
main.
does Null Rod.
Right, but Null Rod is colorless to cast. So you can cast it off of Ancient Tomb, Mana Crypt. You can double spell with it much quicker. Stony Silence wastes a whole fucking pip. You gotta waste a whole pip on that piece of shit.
All the decks that are playing Collector Oof that are playing white also are, like I said, are playing Collector Oof, right?
It's just the easiness to tutor it makes Collector Oof so much better. It truly does. When you have 5 copies of Collector Oof, but you still only have the 1 copy of the
that
Stony
makes
Silence.
sense. Yeah, you don't need to actually play 3 copies of this effect.
You
Because,
can just find it with
yeah,
the
you just find it
tutors.
with your tutors
Yeah.
instead.
Do you want to talk about Opposition Agent right now or later?
We'll talk about
it.
it real soon. Let's
Okay.
play Stony Silence underneath Rest in Peace.
Yeah, unfortunate. It probably should. Maybe it should be higher, but for now, that's where I'm putting it.
For now, that's where we're gonna put it. And
It's better than
now
Rest in
we'll
Peace.
talk
Actually, it's better than Rest in
about-
Peace. It's just above Rest in Peace. I'm sorry, Rest in Peace is still a stinker.
You know what? I'm gonna put it above Blind Obedience then too.
Yeah, fine. It can be there.
The effect is more powerful.
The effect is strong, undeniably.
It's just not played because of Collector Oof, and then we shouldn't punish it for that right now. Cool. Okay. Well, now let's talk about tutor hate while we're talking about tutors. Then
Great. Okay.
there's 2 cards that qualify for this category: Aven Mind Sensor.
Idiot Bird.
Yep, Idiot Bird, and Opposition Agent, which is an asshole human.
Wait. Agreed. Oppo obviously way better, but there's only one Oppo, and sometimes you want a second one, so the Aven Mind Sensor is still good. Oppo's crazy strong. It's just
Yeah.
it stops so many things. It stops some of the main ways to make your deck consistent, which is what cEDH like struggles with. And by that I just mean you're a 100 card singleton, so you have to find a way to make your deck consistent. And tutors are a great way to do that. So shutting off like one of the most powerful things we have access to is really good, and it's one-sided. Doesn't affect you. So that's great.
Yeah, exactly. So it just completely allows you to be free to do whatever you need to do. Being able to steal things from your opponent's deck too is absolutely nutty. Like having a way to generate card advantage once off of this, like at least have it replace itself, is so powerful.
We've talked about this a couple of times, but the being able to allow you to win the game is why a lot of these stacks pieces are going to go higher on the list. To be honest, I don't know. Like this is one of the Opposition Agent goes in non-stacks lists. Collector Oof really just kind of goes in the stacks lists.
That's true, yeah. And Collector Oof is something you have to play around too, because it's a universal effect.
Is this better than Collector Oof?
I'm gonna put it above Collector Oof.
Collector Oof can completely shut down a board. Opposition Agent can be a little bit more quiet.
Opposition Agent is one of those cards that you don't actually know how good it is until players start to say, oh my god, this Opposition Agent, or like at the end of the game and people tell you this Opposition Agent was so good as they show you Court of Calling, Demonic Tutor, Enlightened Tutor. Like there's just so many cards that you fill in your deck that just say go get another card. There's so many lands that then you can't crack because they go get something out of your library. It opens up so many avenues for you, the player that has it. It has flash. You don't have to commit this until you're ready for it either.
Yeah, I agree. It's as a card, I think this is better than Collector Oof. Yes, as a stacks piece, I think the artifact ability is stronger, but
What happens when someone bounces your Collector Oof and then wins the game immediately, right? But then if you
with Oppo, you just recast it.
you just recast it. When you have the mana, you just
Oh, yeah.
recast it. Yeah. So
Yeah,
like
I think
it
Oppo's
just-
better.
The utility that it has attached to its ability is what also makes it so good. Like if Collector Oof cost 1 more mana but also had flash, I would put that above Opposition Agent.
And only affected your opponents? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
definitely,
100%.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But we got to take into account the entire thing.
Yeah. We're everything from the bottom up.
Oppo first.
Oppo first. Even Mind Sensor now, I also really like. Like this also has flash, which is super cool.
And flying.
And flying, which makes it even better in like the Timna decks too, which are typically the decks that are playing this if you want 2 of this effect.
The only issue is it doesn't necessarily, they could still find something in the top 4. You know, it doesn't always do everything. Usually it does. But also, this doesn't gain you anything. You don't get
No.
any advantage out of it. Besides it being a flying attacker for Timna, which is relevant. Opposition Agent does not have flying, so can't connect as reliably. That is something. But I still think Mind Sensor is a little bit lower.
And sometimes they find something like Demonic Tutor, instead of it being shut off, it's an impulse instead.
Whereas with Opposition Agent, Demonic Tutor is lights out if you grab that on Opposition because you get to search for anything.
Exactly, right? So it is kind of like a completely different effect.
Yeah.
But it's also a 1 toughness creature, which it can't be in the top 5 if
Or in
it's
a
going to be a
Bowmaster
1
world.
toughness creature. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put this Aven Mind Sensor probably below Null Rod.
Okay, I could believe that.
Now I don't know, though, because now we're getting into like Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, Chalice of the Void territory.
I like Avacyn more than Thalia, I think.
You like Aven Mind Sensor more than Thalia?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that what I said?
You said Avacyn, which...
Who's Avacyn? Like the angel?
The angel, Avacyn, yeah.
Aven Mind Sensor, I think, is better than Thalia. Thalia can fuck you. Aven Mind Sensor can't really fuck you.
True,
I mean,
yeah.
I guess it could if I could use my fetch to find a land for my swan song. But Aven Mind Sensor, I like Aven better.
Let's talk about this fun one. Archon of Valor's Reach.
Who?
Does this qualify for top 10? Should we read this one? This
We
is
might have to
probably
read this one.
the least known card on this list.
Read it. Is this in the category of Archons?
You know what? No. I have that other card that you're thinking of in a separate category that we'll talk about.
All right.
But Archon of Valor's Reach is 4, a green and a white for a 5/6 creature Archon. It has flying, trample, and vigilance. And it says, as Archon of Valor's Reach enters the battlefield, choose artifact, enchantment, instant, or sorcery, or planeswalker. Players can't cast spells of the chosen type.
This one is huge. That sets it apart from the other STAX pieces by quite a substantial margin. Most of them are 2 and 3 mana. This one's 6 mana, which is a big increase. But this effect is very strong, and it being on a 5/6 flying.
Like, it's a game ender. It's a 5/6 flying, vigilant, and trampler.
And trample. So the vigilance being able to also have you block is actually going to be pretty relevant. The effect is strong, but it's another one that you can guess wrong. If you say the wrong type and you get blown out by another card type combo, that can suck. But you can be really rewarded if you name the right thing. If you are pairing this with other effects like Chalice of the Void and Sanctum Prelate and maybe a clone or something like that, if you can start locking out multiple avenues at that point, then we're really talking. But if this by itself, it's not always enough. It's not always going to do something, whereas some of the ones higher on the list, Collector Roof is always doing something. Opposition Agent, Dathi Voidwalker, those cards are kind of always doing something.
Especially like in your opening hand, they're always doing something where like the value of Archon you're not going to see until significantly later in the game.
Yeah, I think for that reason, it's unfortunately got to be a little bit lower. As much as I love this card, even in my Blood Pod deck, I recently swapped this out for Sire of Insanity. I don't know if that's right, but I'm
so
trying
cool.
Sire for now. So I think I rate this one a little bit lower right now.
So how much lower? Like, do you think you like it more than Aven Mind Sensor?
What's our number 10 right now?
Trinisphere.
I think this is worse than Trinisphere.
We're going to just put Archon of Valor's Reach at number 10 no matter what the list is. What if we did that?
Okay, great.
Great. Okay. This will be the number 10 is Archon of Valor's Reach.
Sure.
That's how we'll figure that out. So we'll talk about another top one here.
I would love to.
Drannith Magistrate.
Ooh, woof.
Woof is right.
I think this one is one of the strongest, honestly.
I definitely agree. Yeah, not only like shutting off of people from being able to play their commanders, but also shutting off Underworld Breach lines, shutting off Opposition Agent from being able to cast the spells from underneath Opposition Agent.
Shuts off Dathi.
Shuts off Food Chain. Like, so many things.
I rate Dathi really highly. A turn 1 Dathi, I think, is like a very, very, very strong play.
We're talking about Drannith Magistrate.
Yeah, I think Drannith is great. A turn 1 Drannith is super fucking powerful. You can really shut out a lot of commanders. The issue is if you play it late after everyone's commander's already out, it can kind of do nothing. And part of me wants to say this is the number 1 strongest STAX piece, but the fact that it doesn't always do something makes me not so sure.
It's also always doing more than you think that it is,
That's
too.
another one.
Like,
Yeah,
there's
true.
a lot of different ways that it is generating value, even outside of just people not being able to do their commanders. It's just a long list of really powerful cEDH spells like Jessica's Will and stuff like that it really does shut off, and it's powerful things that it's shutting off.
Yeah, its ceiling is super high. Sometimes it can just turn 2 decks completely off. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
lights out, they can't do anything if they can't get their commander out. The floor is a little bit low. I would say that sometimes Drannith is bad, whereas some of the like Opposition Agent never really feels bad.
Well, it's also an asymmetrical effect too. So it's something that you're not getting hit with. It's only your opponents that are getting hit with. It has a great body. A 1/3 is an awesome set of stats.
Is it better than Oppo though?
I put Opposition Agent in like Rogsai.
Yeah.
But in like if Rogsai had white, like we were talking about how maybe not every single turbo deck should be playing Drannith Magistrate, maybe because it's technically not as ubiquitous, it goes underneath Oppo but still above Collector Oof.
Yeah, I would put Oppo in basically any black deck, I think, even in some of the turbo, not all the turbo decks, but some of the turbo decks.
Opposition Agent is one of the only cards on this list that actually gets you additional value outside of providing a stacks piece.
If I'm going to be completely honest, I kind of view Collector Oof, Opposition Agent, and Drannith Magistrate all at equal power levels. That is truly how I feel. But for sake of one needing to be the best, I will say that Opposition Agent is the strongest, then Drannith, and Collector Oof for right now.
I would agree. Also, more decks don't play Collector Oof because of their need for artifacts.
Once we get a Drannith Magistrate, like a just your opponents can't activate artifacts, then we'll be really cooking.
All right, so next we're going to talk about Torpil Orb.
That's not...
That's not the name of the card. And I learned that when I was making the list and I had to find Torpil Orb. And I was like...
Say it again slow how you think it is.
Torpil. No.
You had an L in there somewhere.
There's an L. Torpil Orb. Torporal.
Torpor. I think that's like Pennsylvania accent. Can you real quick? How do you say drawing?
Drawing.
You don't put the L in there?
I don't put the L in drawing.
Put the L in there?
No, I don't say drawing. No,
Okay.
it's a drawing. You draw. Drawing. Okay.
Torpor orb.
Torpor orb.
We got a couple of these effects.
We're not done talking about how stupid of a word this is.
I was really trying to move on.
Okay, we can. All right. There are a couple of these effects, but Torpor orb is really the best one.
No ETBs.
No ETBs is what
Enter
this
the
does.
battlefield effects. This says they don't do that.
They don't do that.
We just got a new blue one, a Merfolk that does something like this, that shuts off ETBs and also is like they can't ETB.
Tashawn's Tidebinder, is that the one you're
that's the
referring
one.
to?
That's the one, yeah.
They can't continue to activate that ability.
I haven't seen that one much in play yet, and
No, me
for the
neither.
most part, rate these cards very bad. I do not play them.
Torpor orb is the only one that I actually have on the list because the other ones I don't think are worth including for top 10 purposes. They're just that much lower of value than what Torpor orb is.
You're having a hard time with that word.
This is I'm having such a hard time. Let's just place it somewhere and move on.
11. We're not going to ever talk about it again.
Great. I'm just deleting it.
Okay, it's gone. Get it out of here. Card sucks. Hard to say.
Sick of it. Yeah. Let's talk about Curse Totem next. A card I can say a better 2-mana artifact.
I
in my
think this
opinion.
one is a better one. Yeah.
It's a shame that there's not that many decks that can actually play it because activated abilities are so ubiquitous.
That's kind of true.
So many commanders rely on it. They're either their commander has an activated ability, they're playing mana dorks. Like there's some kind of confliction with so many of the STAX decks that not as many of them get to play this. But
specifically the STAX decks, I think
that's what it is.
There are a lot of good decks that don't play any activated abilities from creatures, but they're not STAX decks. A lot of turbo decks don't really care about this effect, but they're not trying to stax the board out. I really like Curse Totem in decks like Tivit that really don't care too much about it at all.
Blue-black decks tend to be where this shines
slower
the best.
decks.
Yeah, I've really liked it in Nimrus as well.
Great. I'm sure it's great in Nimrus. Yeah, any deck that's looking to slow the game down a little bit, this is a really good silver bullet for things like Kinnan and Najeela. Can really shut them right off, and those are decks that you're definitely going to see a lot. So I'm a fan of this one, but it doesn't advance you very much. You have to be able to do something. You have to capitalize on the time that it grants you. And if you can't do that, this effect is no good. So you have to do something to be able to capitalize on that extra time. If you have something like Tivit where you can gain a whole bunch of advantage through attacks, if you can get to do that, that's great, but just be careful of that. So it's not the best thing in the world, but it can be powerful.
It's a really potent effect, I would say. I think this is actually better than Null Rod because there's not a creature that does this better.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of fighting against Dauntless Dismantler now. I feel like I'd kind of rather have Dauntless Dismantler, but I think Curse Totem is something that more decks would go to than Null Rod.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So I'll put that there.
I think the decks that want to play Null Rod would rather play just Collect Roof, and the decks that want artifacts that shut things down are looking more for Curse Totem because Null Rod shuts them down. So.
Exactly, yeah. Let's talk about Rule of Laws, because this is also just a completely game-changing effect for a format that wants to play so many spells.
Yes, I think Rule of Laws are definitely some of the more powerful effects in our format. Very difficult to play around nonetheless, but they are very powerful. Some are stronger than others by a lot, though.
Yeah, I think that there's two that we should be talking about, and
I
you
agree.
can correct me if I'm wrong.
I agree.
But I think there's really only two that should really have contention, and the worst of the two is Deafening Silence.
Oh, interesting. I have a third one on your list, but yes,
All
definitely.
right, what one do you think is?
I have the new Phyrexian Censor, I think it is.
Phyrexian Censor, really?
That one also says non-Phyrexian creatures come in tapped, which is very relevant, I find, in a creature-based STAX decks when you don't want your opponent's new creatures to be able to block your attackers, when you want to shut down things like Kiki-Jiki. The added bonus, I think, is really helpful. I think Rule of Law at 3 mana needs something else attached to it. Archon of Emeria is the other one that we're about to talk about.
Yeah,
has
that is.
the lands entering tapped attached to it, which makes it good. Phyrexian Censor has the creatures coming in tapped, which is an extra things tapped to, which is good. But for me, things like Rule of Law and Eidolon of Rhetoric,
They're too bad now. They're too bad. Yeah.
I don't play them. I don't like them. I take them out because they don't do enough to help me progress my board. Whereas these other two
That's fair.
do two things to slow my opponents down. So that's card advantage.
Are you playing the Censor in Blood Pod?
Oh, yeah.
Have you come across the situation where you shut off your own Kiki-Jiki line? Like
No.
you can't do that? That hasn't come up yet?
I haven't come up against it yet.
That's
it will.
good. I'm
Yeah.
not wishing that on you,
It
but
could
like
come
that's
up.
just one thing I want to remind you to look out for.
Oh yeah, no, I am aware. It does shut off the Kiki combo itself. That's true. But I just find the added bonus is helpful. You can play around it because
all right, I like that. Well, then there's 3, because what I like about Deafening Silence is that it's a 1-mana version of this. Like, the only thing that it doesn't shut off is Thassa's Oracle, but like everything else that those decks are trying to do, especially the really quick ad nauseum ones, the Grixis decks, this is still like one of the best things you could have against it.
Definitely. Now, these ones are similar to the taxing effects that you can shut off your opponents. You stop a counter war from happening, which means some players might going to be able to figure out a way to win or something like that. Just play them carefully, play them at the right times. They can be backbreakingly strong, but they can also lose you the game if you play them at the wrong time. So as long as you're aware of that, cards are good.
Okay, so now we have to figure out what the new worst one of these is. Is it Deafening Silence or Phyrexian
I think
Censor?
Phyrexian Censor is probably still worse than Deafening Silence. Deafening Silence is just going to see play in more types of decks, and it's cheaper. 1 mana makes it so much stronger than 3 mana.
Probably true, especially because Deafening Silence is really good in these creature-heavy decks that allow you to still jam out a Mana Dork and 2 stacks pieces in the same turn, while you're still shutting off your opponents.
Right, but the ability to go like turn 1 Chalice to the Void on 0 Deafening Silence, that's gonna be really good.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
all right, so Phyrexian Censor, the worst of these, but still gonna be
so good.
Above Null Rod though.
Yeah.
And above Curse Totem too.
Yeah.
What about against Dauntless Dismantler?
It's hard to say because we haven't seen him play
yet. That card doesn't exist. Well, then let's put it above it then, because that's why. And then Manglehorn. I'm gonna put this underneath Manglehorn.
I think it's underneath Manglehorn. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Deafening Silence.
Probably above Manglehorn.
I'm thinking the same thing, above Manglehorn, but under Dauthi Voidwalker.
Yep.
I think I'd much rather have a turn 1 Dauthi Voidwalker.
And Archon's probably just above, just below Dauthi Voidwalker, just above Deafening Silence, I think, because the extra lands and also it being a flyer makes it enough better than Phyrexian Censor, or is it still worse than Deafening Silence, do you think, because it's 3 versus 1?
I think it's definitely better than Deafening Silence.
But I don't think it's better than Dauthi.
Because you can't, there's nothing that breaks it.
Yeah.
You just have that effect. And you think it's worse than Dauthi?
Well, Dauthi can progress you forward, with Archon it only can do that with its flying for Tymna, but outside of that, it doesn't actually push you forward.
I guess that's true. If you have the ability to turn 1 this, it is like one of the best things you can have on turn 1. I like it better if I have it on turn 1 than Dauthi Voidwalker, but I just don't think you always have that option. So maybe for that reason, I think you're right. It has to go under Dauthi.
Yeah, Dauthi's better late game. I would think this card is kind of shitty late game, I think. But Dauthi's can be really good in the late game.
It's funny how right now, like the top 4 or 5 is like eons above in power level than like the rest of the list that we have right now. It's very funny.
Interesting.
We have 3 more categories of cards to talk about here.
Let's do it.
Let's start off with a singular card, Grafdigger's Cage.
Oh, sure.
This one is really only good against kind of one deck now, because Winota doesn't really see so much tournament play anymore.
Shuts off Underworld Breach.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true. So that shuts off a lot of decks. Yeah, Kitten's the main one that I'm thinking of.
Shuts off green strategies. The green tutors into play, the Birthing Pods, the Vivians, the Finale of Devastations, that kind of shit.
That's also true, yeah.
I think Grafdigger's Cage actually shuts off a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of decks that want to play it again, because there's a lot of decks that are trying to cast things and get cards from other places.
To me, those are the 2 main strategies. You're either doing Grixis Underworld Breach or you're doing green Birthing Pod. There's other stuff, but to me, those are like the best things, I think.
It's all the subcategories of those things.
Right? And then this card shuts off all that shit. So there's not a lot of decks that can play it. Yuriko is one of them, and I think it's great.
Again, this is another blue-black card.
Blue-black loves this card.
Blue-black loves this. Like, your blue-black control decks are slotting in this, Curse Totem, and like maybe the other the 2-mana Grafdigger's Cage, which I don't really play.
This one also notable that it's a 1-mana artifact that Urza Saga can find.
I love that about this.
That's pretty relevant. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it doesn't actually push you forward. That's okay. It shuts off a lot of wins. And not a lot of progression. It doesn't really do anything in the early game. It only kind of shuts off like green tutors and win conditions
as they start to go through their value stuff.
So it's better late game, even though turn 1 can be really good against a Kinnan or a Winota.
But it's just so cheap. Like, if you have nothing else to do on turn 1,
if it doesn't affect you, it feels like almost free.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you have it off of Urza Saga, like that especially is free. But if like you just have a hand that has like really good like turn 2, turn 3 impactful plays, and you can just go, well, I'm going to turn 1 this Grafdigger's Cage, and it's not going to do much right now, but like my next couple turns are really affecting the board, and later in the game, this Grafdigger's Cage is going to save me at a time where now I didn't need to like save up my mana for it later on.
Yeah, I think this is of the Cursed Totem, Null Rod artifacts that don't do anything but stop stuff from happening.
It's the best one.
I think it's the best one because of its 1 mana.
Yeah, most definitely then too. I think it's going to be above Dauntless Dismantler right now too.
Even though Dismantler kills it, which is great.
Yeah, but I like this effect right now more just because I haven't seen Dauntless Dismantler. And then versus Phyrexian Censor.
Yeah, probably. I don't know.
It's tough because Phyrexian Censor like also shuts off a lot of the same things that this does too. Whereas like the green decks can't storm through creatures so much. You can't go through Underworld Breach lines where you're trying to storm off or like do a lot of stuff after your ad nauseum. It kind of does the same thing, but
I think it's better. I think it's better than Censor. The 1 mana is what's most important in our format, so that's gonna push these cards higher the lower the mana cost.
I guess that's fair. Then versus Manglehorn or Deafening Silence.
I feel like it's worse than Deafening Silence. Maybe I think it's better. Most people would probably say it's better than Manglehorn. I don't know that I agree though. I think Manglehorn is better. Manglehorn does 2 things. I like Manglehorn more.
Manglehorn does do 2 things. Grafdigger's Cage can sometimes do nothing for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about Blood Moons.
Blood Moons. Once they were great, then Dockside Extortions.
And then Dockside Extortions was made, and then they printed Professional Facebreaker, and then they printed Ragavan.
And a bunch of red cards that make treasures.
Yeah, and now even in other 60-card formats, they printed Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and now nobody cares about Blood Moons
Although
anymore.
I still play one of Blood Moon in my Fury list in Modern. I still think it's fine. I think, but either way, for cEDH, the card has gotten worse. It's great on the play. If you're going first, turn 1 Blood Moon can be really strong.
Very powerful, yeah. I put Back to Basics in this category, too.
I think that's good. Yeah, I think that kind of goes in the same thing.
It's like for my monocolor decks that want to shut off lands and be happy that they're playing the monocolored lands.
It is a draw to monocolor. If you're playing monocolor, if you're playing mono blue for one or mono red for the other, I think these are fine additions to your deck. If you're playing monocolor, you are at a disadvantage. So I don't think that the addition of mediocre stacks pieces should be a reason to play those anymore. At one point, I did think that. The issue is just shutting off only lands doesn't do enough because more often than not, people have more of their mana invested in artifacts.
It's really good in conjunction with a lot of these other mana-hating stacks pieces that we're talking about. Like if you have this and Collector Oof, like game over, right? As long as you are ahead on board, you got this game.
If you get the Trinity, if you get Linvala and Collector Oof and Magus the Moon out at the same time, so people can't activate lands, they can't activate artifacts, they can't activate creatures. We didn't talk about Linvala when we talked about Curse Totem.
I think Curse Totem is a little bit better than Linvala. There's really only... I think there's only select fewer decks that are playing Linvala.
Both of the Linvalas are flying creatures that only affect your opponents.
I guess that's true. Curse Totem's so cheap.
That's true.
Curse Totem's so cheap.
I'm going to deviate, I'm so sorry, and really quick announce that the new Drana and Linvala, the black-white one, that card, we should put that on this list somewhere. Although
that should get somewhere.
I think it's one of the strongest stacks pieces we've seen in a while. The fact that it takes activation abilities from opponents, like you can activate your opponent's Thrasioses and shit like that. I think that card is really good.
All right, yeah.
4 mana is huge, and I haven't played enough with it.
That effect is nuts.
The effect is really
nutty,
strong.
But like, I'm really hesitant to put it in the top 5 based on like its mana cost and
it's Deafening
also
Silence
like how
next.
Impactful all these other things are too. Yeah.
Deafening Silence. What's after Deafening Silence?
Deafening Silence. Manglehorn is next.
I think it's better than Manglehorn.
I could see it being better than Manglehorn. I could argue that.
I don't play Manglehorn in Bloodpod, but I play this card in Bloodpod.
Because a lot of the things that Manglehorn shuts off like this also does too. Like you can't go through Dockside loops.
You need 4 mana good creatures that also just attack and kill, which is a 3 mana. The 3 flying power is really helpful. I think this is better than Manglehorn. I'm going to sneak it in.
All right, we'll put Drana and Linvala in there. We got that snuck in.
What were we talking about before?
We were talking about putting Blood Moons underneath Blind Obedience.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's where we're going to put all of the Blood Moons.
I don't play Blood Moon or Magus the Moon in Blood Pod right now, and I do play some of these other cards we're talking about.
Why are you still calling it Blood Pod then?
To be honest, I'm not. I'm calling it Scam Pod now.
Ooh, okay.
Because I'm playing Fury and Shieldred and Sire of Insanity, along with the Orcish Bowmaster and Goblin Sharpshooter and Mayhem Devil. Those last few cards are really just pingers, but the first couple, Shieldred, Fury is also a pinger, and Sire of Insanity kind of attack the hand more. It only shares very small similarities with the modern deck scam, but
Like no actual scam.
no actual scam, no grief. I'm not playing grief, but I am playing Fury and I'm playing Shieldred with scam. Plays a couple in the sideboard.
How
maybe
many
one in the
not
main.
dead after alls are you running?
0 of that effect. Sire of Insanity is like the scam effect because scam,
Yeah,
like
true.
grief isn't really that good. But what I'm trying to do is get a Tana into play, an Eldritch Evolution into it, into a Sire of Insanity.
Oh,
Opponents-
that's insane.
And in a world with Ristic Study and Opposition Agent and all these draw engine and type effects, I want to keep everyone's hand very low.
I really
said
like this.
Opposition Agent, but I meant other Ristic Study type effects. Sire feels great right now, so we'll see.
Yeah. Do you think Sire of Insanity should deserve a place
Yeah,
somewhere
let's put
on the
Sire
list?
on this list. It's number 10. Take away that other
Number
thing.
10, Arcane of Valor's Reach.
Gone.
Fuck you.
Get it outta here.
Or should it be number 9?
No, it should be
We're
Archon's
only
number.
going to have 6 mana fucking creatures on this
No,
list.
Archon's 11. I get Archon to 11.
All right, Archon's 11. We'll
Sire
have
of Insanity is the news 10.
Nice.
Just
That
because I
sounds
like it.
awesome. Now we're going to talk about card draw hate.
And we're not going to talk about Orcish Bowmaster in this part.
No, we're not talking about Orcish Bowmaster
What
because
are we
that's
talking
not
about?
a stacks piece. We're talking about Notion Thief,
Okay.
Narset Parter of Veils,
I understand now.
and Spirit of the Labyrinth.
These actually stop the draws.
Correct.
That
Yes.
makes them stacks pieces. Shieldred and Orcish Bowmaster, those are value pieces.
Correct. Yes, they're generating value by attacking other resources like life totals and or creatures.
But these ones here are denying the card effect whatsoever. Notion Thief is really strong.
Probably one of the better ones. Yeah.
Probably one of the better ones. It's very fragile. And I have been, unfortunately, kind of like accidentally blown out by this card a couple times. The draws are mandatory so someone can make you draw cards when you got like a Thassa's Oracle or something on the stack.
Really, these are all fragile. Like, I just want to get that out there. Like, the creatures have 1 toughness, and then the other one's a planeswalker.
Which can be so easily attacked. Our format.
And has no plus ability, so it just goes away then.
Yeah, so as powerful as these effects are, they're on fragile bodies, which brings their power level down just a touch. I think Notion Thief is the strongest one because its ability to make you win the game, which is why Oppo and Dothi Voidwalker are so strong. Like that effect is really good. Combining this with a wheel, forcing to take your opponent's draws, really good.
But I don't think that the other 2 are going to make the list for top 10. So I think
Just under.
Notion Thief's really right now the only one we need to worry about. I think it's better than Sire of Insanity, so I think it's definitely going to make the top 10 here. I don't think it's better than our top 5.
Nope.
I'm starting to like this a little bit more than
I think
Deafening
I like it more than
Silence or-
Deafening Silence. The ceiling is much higher than for Deafening Silence.
Yeah, and again, you have Flash.
Yeah. I think I'm going to put it higher than Deafening Silence. Even though that 1 mana is insanely powerful, the effect of Notion Thief is still very strong. The only issue is Notion Thief fights with a lot of other 4-drop spots, and you don't want a lot of high CMC. There's not a lot of blue stacks decks. And in a lot of ways, Deafening Silence is better.
Well, the other thing that I do want to mention, though, is that it has Flash, and we did previously value Flash very highly as well. It's not something that you have to commit until it's going to do something that you need it to do. And what was the other thing that you said?
Who knows?
It was a
so long ago.
4-drop. Is that it's so
4 mana.
expensive?
There's
Yeah.
a lot of other 4-drops.
There's
Not a
a-
lot, but you don't want to play too many.
Yeah, I guess Notion Thief isn't seen as much as a stacks piece, and it's usually being used in conjunction with wheels. Maybe I'm valuing it too much as a card advantage engine, and instead I should be evaluating it more as a stacks piece, which would lower it if that's the case.
I think we maybe should.
It'll be worse than Deafening Silence then.
Maybe.
What about versus Drana and Linvala or Manglehorn?
It's probably above Drana and Vala and Mega.
All right, cool. So we just swapped these around. All right. Well, I think we're pretty happy with this list then.
Great. Is that it? Or is that all we're talking about?
That's all that I have
Oh,
here.
baby.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you have any? Are there any other cards that come to your mind?
Let me think. Hold on.
again, my thought process was if there wasn't anything else that isn't on this list, it can't. There's no way it's in the top 10.
Ranger Captain of Eos is not a stacks piece.
I don't. It kind of pretends to be a stacks piece, but I don't think of Ranger Captain as a stacks piece. I think of it as a
kind of a
silence,
permanent.
which is different.
Yeah, but it's
It's not a static ability. Everything else we've been talking about deals with static abilities. That's an activated ability
Vexing
that you can
Shusher?
only use once.
Vexing Shusher is not really a stacks piece.
I don't think
you have
it-
to put mana into it. which
Protection
makes
is
it-
what I call it. I think that file's under there. This will be a good ending.
just like that's it.
All right, there we go.
I am a liar though. I do still have Rest in Peace. I thought I cut it.
Dude, get that. You have an
I have a
extra
free
fucking
card to cut
card.
now.
Yeah,
Great.
extra fucking
I
card.
already convinced myself the card sucks, so I'm fucking taking it out of the deck for sure.
All right, the top 11 stacks pieces in cEDH. Number 11, Archon of Valor's Reach. Number 10, Sire of Insanity. We're off to a great start on this list here. Number 9 stacks piece is Manglehorn. Number 8, Drana and Linvala. Late edition sneaking into the list. Our number 7, we have Notion Thief. For number 6, we have Deafening Silence. Number 5, very similar effect in Archon of Emeria. Our number 4 best stacks piece is Dauthi Voidwalker. Our number 3 best stacks piece is Collector Oof. Number 2, second best stacks piece, Dranic Magistrate. And our best stacks piece in cEDH, we have Opposition Agent.
Is black-white secretly the best stacks color combination?
I think it's definitely the best stacks color combination.
I thought
you
green-white was, but looking at this list, it feels more like black-white.
Because when you also incorporate your commander options, like you get Timna in black-white.
I guess when you're in black-white, you're in Timna, which means that you are playing more than just black-white.
Which is the other thing, too, yeah. So I think that kind of makes Timna, black-white plus green X decks really the place that you want to be. I think I love that.
And red for Kiki. We're talking about Blood Pod. Blood Pod's the best deck in the format. Thanks for watching.
See you next time. Oh, shit. We have to do our shit.
Okay, yeah, do the ending. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for watching. If you like to support us or listening, if you like to support us directly, you can do so on Patreon, like our $100 patrons.
Devlin, Mark Cirillo, Alan but in lowercase, Zachary Nelson, she doesn't even go here, Joey Aaron, SoCal Acura, Stormageddon, Luke Cook, AJ Albosabi, Kylock, Demon of Razgariz, Uncle Butts, Kawaja A. Hamid, Lauren Connell, and Baby G-Bus.
If you'd like to pick up any of our merch, you can do that at playtowinmtg.com.
Big thank you to Dragon Shield. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Make sure you use our affiliate link in code PLAYTOWIN5 for 5% off your order down below.
Check out us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for more content.
Thank you so much for watching.
See you next time. Or listening.
Tyler Heckenliable, Malcraft, Focus Lamia, Jabaha, Dalton Poteet, Kadanis, Lutri's dad, Mitchell Shepard, Justin Mansolo, Pedro, Jacob Depp, Michael Ballou, Jan Wildfang, Thomas Bueno, and David Nelson.
Is this thing on? Hello?
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 Are we rolling?
The cameras are rolling.
I don't believe you.
You can trim a little bit of what I said if you want to in the actual podcast. I went on for a bit and didn't know what the card does.
That's fair.